Call the committee of a whole to order. Roll call.
Trustee O'Rourke.
Here.
Trustee Peck.
Here.
Trustee Rassich.
Here.
Trustee Wachowski.
Here.
Trustee Benucci.
Here.
Trustee Lamb.
Here.
Mayor Collins.
Here, rise for the.
We're seeking a motion to approve the minutes of the Committee of the Whole workshop and executive session held on May 11th.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. Presidential comments?
I have none, Steve.
Trustees' comments? There are no trustee comments. This would be time for public comments, not to exceed 3 to 5 minutes. There are no public comments. Then we will proceed with the workshop meeting. First item on the agenda is proposed cupcake and food truck policy.
Thank you. The planning staff is bringing forth two kind of companion topics for consideration by the board to allow for some discussion and direction. The two topics are related to food in one form or another. The first being the potential for the village to adopt a home kitchen operation ordinance, which is sometimes known as the cupcake ordinance. That would allow for home-based preparation of food on a very limited basis with limited oversight or involvement in permitting on the part of the village or the Will County Health Department. And then the second topic is a topic that's been considered in the past regarding food trucks, but staff thought it would be appropriate to bring the topic forward to revisit it, given the kind of the changing nature and prevalence of food trucks over the past several years. So I'll give a brief summary of each, and then perhaps we can dive in and take them one at a time for direction. Specific to the cupcake ordinance, over the last year or so, the state of Illinois approved a new law that allows for home-based preparation of potentially or non-potentially hazardous foods. So in other words, things that are non-perishable and don't contain things that need to be refrigerated, such as meats and cheeses. Presently, or prior to the law being enacted, any food that was prepared for public sale needed to be prepared in a commercial kitchen that's inspected by the Will County Health, well, here in Plainfield it'd be the Will County Health Department. So this change would allow small operations to prepare limited amounts of food for sale to the public, and the limit would be up to $1,000 in retail sales per month, or $12,000 over the course of a year. What prompts staff to bring this forward tonight is that we have received two requests from people. One request was pertaining to baking of pies that are infused with wine. So this is a specific request or proposal in that regard. And then the second request was for baking of granola bars and selling to the public. Some of the considerations involved here include what licensing, if there's support on the part of the village, what licensing we would like to see and require, and more importantly, what type of inspection. There would be no advanced inspection of the individual's kitchen, but the law does provide an opportunity in the event of a disease outbreak or complaints on the part of the public for an organization to then go into where the food is prepared and investigate. So there's a question here of staffing. Staff submits that the village is not probably equipped to handle that in terms of the specialty knowledge that perhaps would be required. And in discussions with Will County, it's our understanding that Will County likewise is not prone to having additional resources to dedicate to the potential need for additional inspection. So those are kind of some of the overall topics and aspects that we'd welcome discussion on. Kind of shifting gears to the second consideration regarding food trucks. In the past, as this has been considered, it's been the village's policy that food trucks would not be permitted on public rights of way. So for example, during a special event or during the normal course of business, we would restrict food trucks from parking in public parking spaces However, if they did come to an agreement with a private property owner, that the food truck would be allowed to park and sell, of course, if they were permitted on private property. Over the last probably 5 years or so, there's been kind of an explosion of food trucks. They've gone from your typical mundane, hot dogs and things like that to now there's probably a food truck for any taste you might have. And it's really changed in nature as well, the types of events and the prevalence of food trucks. So staff is not opposed to food trucks, but we would, I guess, welcome discussion and consideration on the appropriate location where they can be permitted. If we simply maintain the policy that's been articulated in the past, or if it's appropriate at this time to make any changes. So those are the kind of two general areas for discussion, and staff would welcome direction and questions. Thank you.
Take them one at a time. A couple of comments on the cupcakes. I think you slipped the definition of non-hazardous baking in there, and that's by perishable. How do you define perishable baking? Or how are we going to know what's perishable or not perishable?
I think it just generally or generically, it would be things that that don't require refrigeration.
Okay, so they don't, non-hazardous things that don't require refrigeration.
Correct.
By definition.
I understand.
Okay. From my point of view, the cupcake ordinance, I think makes some sense. It allows some flexibility for some initiative on a small scale in town, and I think that's probably a good idea. I give the 12-year-old girl credit in Troy who got the law passed in the first place, and it makes some sense and allows people to do some things and generate some revenue for it. So I think that's a good idea. As far as who's going to monitor it if there's a problem, my guess is the county would have to take care of it if there's a disease outbreak. They'd look into it no matter whether they had the resources or not. They're obligated to. I agree, we don't have the resources to do that, and we probably ought not to be doing it. The other comment I'd make is I think we ought to license people who are doing this just so we know who they are. The license can be a nominal license, it's $10 or something like that, but we need to know who and where this is occurring. Otherwise, we're in the dark, and that's not a good position for the village to be in. So, in general, I support the cupcake ordinance or creating one.
I agree with Bill on the support for the ordinance. I would like to see if there was an ingredient list. A lot of the children have allergies to certain peanuts and other items, and I would agree that we should license it because at least the village would know who they are and then require them to perhaps put an ingredient list on the package that they're selling.
A good point, and I actually failed to mention that the law does require noticing both on the product itself and at the point of sale that the product was produced in a non-licensed kitchen, and there's also kind of a blanket or a general disclaimer that the product may contain allergens. It's just sort of because the public doesn't know specifically what was in that environment. There is a kind of a general disclaimer as well.
This is an interesting situation. In your particular staff report, Mr. Prue, you have under issues. Currently, the village does not have a qualified staff to inspect the home-baked business. If any issues were to arise, Will County Health Department stated they do not have the manpower to inspect these small businesses. We're opening ourselves up. If we do pass something, we don't have the staff to inspect, to check, and the county doesn't. I don't know if the CIA is going to come in and do something, but it's almost an impossibility to govern this particular issue. I don't view it as a major problem, but yet governing it is going to be an impossibility. It's simply not going to happen. Thank you.
Rasich has some very good points. I think this may be the first time in the history of me sitting on this board seeing possibly an unfunded mandate going from the bottom up, where the county actually does have to step in and react based on our legislation. I do firmly believe that if there is some sort of an outbreak, that the county health department will by law, have to step in and deal with it, and that's their budget and that's their problem, not ours. Now, as far as you'd mentioned, I believe wine infused or whatnot, I have a little problem with that as far as having alcohol or any other, should they decriminalize marijuana and having glaucoma patients get special cupcakes or whatever, that's not gonna happen. I don't see that as anything doable, in the village here. Wine infused cupcakes, bad idea. That would not fall under our liquor ordinance. I don't know if there is anything that even allows for that at a liquor establishment. So I don't know if you want to elaborate about our liquor licensing with wine-infused foods.
I would have to do a little bit more homework on that. That being said, fruitcakes typically have rum in them, and that gets baked off. The alcoholic impact gets baked off when you're doing the baking process. But again, that's something I'd have to do a little bit more homework on. This particular wine infused, I don't know the
I'm a little
details.
uneasy about that.
But typically, the baking process, it just leaves the flavoring. It doesn't leave the.
Doesn't leave the actual alcohol in it. Okay, well then, that's one issue I'd like to see us get through together as a board. And as far as, enforcement, no, we don't have the manpower or the staff, in my opinion, to be able to go out and, as we've already mentioned, and govern this. But overall, seeing the government get too involved and stop business owners from doing what they do best and be entrepreneurs, you know what? Let's go ahead and put something together and let's get this going.
So overall, I'm initially in support of the idea of, cupcake ordinance. I mean, it seems to make a lot of sense in some ways, but I guess my concern is similar to Trustee Reddit. That, I think everybody agrees that if there's an outbreak, that the county's gonna step in, but the other side of this talks about a complaint. And if there's a complaint, that triggers an inspection, then the question is, if it's really not an outbreak, is the county gonna be required? And maybe not, and then the question is who investigates complaints, and if nobody does the investigation of complaints, does that lead to further issues? So I guess I would look maybe if we can get more details regarding, what is Will County's responsibility in this situation? So in other words, if it is approved, whether they want to or not, where they have to inspect these. And then I agree that there should be some type of license, even if it is, again, a nominal fee, so we can kind of keep track of who's providing what services.
We don't control church bake sales, do we?
This bill actually addresses an issue that had arisen in the past where technically home-baked goods were not appropriate to sell at church bake sales, and so organizations that really followed the rules to the letter of the law would only be able to sell prepackaged goods, granola bars and things that were, so this would address that and now make that permissible once again.
But churches have been doing it for a long time, and to my knowledge, there's not been any serious problems with that. Nobody's had to really investigate it. Maybe it doesn't follow the current law to permit that, but on the other hand, there's not been an overwhelming number of complaints or problems. And, we're talking about very similar type operations on a small scale. Investigation, if you have one complaint a year, I would think we can handle that one way or another. Depends the type of problem it is. The fact we don't have the staff qualified doesn't mean we can't look into it and find somebody we can talk to about the problem. So I think that part of it's manageable. So I still support the idea of creating a cupcake ordinance and making it legitimate to do things that people like to do. Bake, for one thing.
Jonathan, you mentioned, the issues regarding, the license and the inspections, but is there any ideas of where some of these products might be sold at? In other words, is it door to door? Is it through the mail? Is it just at
Well, it would be
events,
allowed
or
in-home or retail. I believe online sales would be prohibited, so, and potentially restaurants. I neglected to take that up, but there are some stipulations on where it's appropriate and where it's not. I know for sure online sales are prohibited.
There've been some local businesses that started out in their house. Their cheesecake place in town that was originally started Yeah, it's an entrepreneur type thing, and sometimes if it takes off, then it leads to a regular business and more normal controls. I agree with Trustee Peck when he said we ought to encourage entrepreneurs if we can, as long as we're reasonably protecting the safety of the public.
You know, what concerns me often is we're making a mountain out of a molehill. I could probably put together a corny pun, but I'll let it go. The one issue that really disturbs me, who's going to police this particular situation? I know I look at Police Chief Konopek. Are you going to organize an individual to, go out and police the community, see if there's crumbs are being burnt or something? But you know what, John, is there a possibility? How many people are actually producing things? We have a rough estimate in this population of 40,000 people, probably 15,000 households. How many people are actually producing baked goods to make a commercial effort out of it? A handful? 10 people, perhaps?
I would be surprised if we get to 10.
That's what I'm.
So it's-
Okay.
They're both behind you currently, right? The two applications that, the two folks that have reached, yeah.
I think in this limited environment, we're not going to need the Cupcake Division of the Plainfield Police Department. I think we're going to be okay as far as enforcement, and it's not going to be an issue.
I think I might have Trustee Rassich taste the wine-infused product.
I don't want him.
Things-
If
this
he
sounds
survives, then it's okay, right?
This sounds.
Before our
Doesn't
board
go
meetings, Mr. Murphy?
I told Administrator Murphy, this is a crummy problem. And I don't see any reason. I mean, come on, board trustees. I don't, you know what, I've been eating cupcakes that were produced by other individuals at church sales, et cetera, for 70 years. I don't think there's going to be a raging epidemic of unsanitary conditions. It simply doesn't happen. It's a buyer's market, and if the food and the quality's not there, it's not going to sell, and the industry will disintegrate. And I have two individuals in the audience who are, they look to me like, if you ever need someone to sample your products, I'm here. I've been an official taster too. But that's exactly how I feel. We do need perhaps an ordinance, but I don't think we should make it so complicated as to inhibit the freedom and the entrepreneurial status of individuals.
I would agree. I mean, I'm involved with a lot of the charity type fundraiser things that have bake sales, and as everybody here has gone to a church or whatever, there's bake sales everywhere, and that would really impact not having the ability to have those sales would really impact a lot of these little fundraisers that go on. I mean, if it could be a big deal to a lot of places, and it's a sense of pride in a lot of places too, when you have these little things at church and people bring these things in, and it's just, again, I agree with the thought of we're overcomplicating this. Let's put something together. If something happens down the way, we'll deal with it when it happens. But people have homeowners insurance, they have their own liability. There's all kinds of things. That's, what's the most you can have? Someone in this day and age, I can see someone complaining about someone else, and they could make a complaint about it. But you're talking about non-perishable food items. I mean, you get sick on a cookie. I mean, I just, I've never heard anyone coming back ever to like the craft show bake sales or church bake sale or school bake sale ever saying I got sick on something, or I wanted to go after this person. I want to know who baked this. So
I think most, if not all of us, are pro-business here, and government should not get in the way of the entrepreneur. Regulate it, but make it a loose regulation, and if the problems arise, we'll deal with them as they come.
Okay. I think we have our direction, and thank you all for your feedback on that point. We'll move on to food trucks now.
So just to summarize again, I guess regarding food trucks, presently, staff adheres to a policy that food trucks would be permitted on private property. There is, the question of whether it's appropriate to allow them on public property. I know Mr. Garrigan included an informative article as an attachment to the memo. Goes into some additional considerations, such as competition or the potential for conflict with established brick and mortar restaurants and food service, and what's equitable and fair to allow you know, a mobile food operator to come in and take advantage of a special event, potentially at the harm to an established local business. The flip side of that is, you know, the mobile food business does provide economic opportunities for the operators, does provide choice for consumers, and that's
John, I did look up several other communities to see, and it's really interesting. The city of Naperville really is extremely restrictive. They do theirs on a lottery basis, so they'll have a couple of businesses out there, but you've got to apply for it, and you've got to bid on getting the license for it, and it's quite extensive. And they all have a lot of things in common. One of them is the concern for the hours of operation have to be defined, and the restrictions. Where's the location? Is it so many feet from an operating business with that same product? I mean, I'm fine with these trucks coming around, and we obviously have them licensed for Plainfield Fest, but for, say, example, cruise nights. But we need to also be mindful of all the other businesses around there. I mean, an ice cream truck, for example, Mary Ann sells ice cream. There's just out of her store. So we have to think of things like that. But I would support them as long as, you know, we kind of look and see what's the plan for the licensing or the restrictions, or how many are we going to allow, or where are they going to be? Because I think that and some of them actually come up with a plan to keep them so much of a distance between an actual brick and mortar store selling the same type of product or near this product. So those are just some of the things that came up. But I would support this, but I'd like to see something where, you know, you've decided on some details, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, you read through the literature that you gave us. You can make it very complicated if you want to, and the number of the towns or cities are big enough to justify that. I can't see doing that in Plainfield. I started out by saying, where would I want to see them in Plainfield? Well, I'd like not to see them on Lockport Street, for one thing. I'd like to see them at events, because I think the local businesses, restaurants and so on, cannot handle necessarily the size of the attendance at some of the events. So I think it makes some sense to do that. In the past, we've used the park, I believe, and they must have had permission from the Park District to have the food trucks there, because they weren't on our streets. The one place where I think they could use a food truck, and no one's suggested yet, and it's private property, is by the Edwards medical area. There's a lot of people that work there, and there's no place for them to go to eat. The closest place is Route 59. So I'd hop in a car and drive a mile to get to restaurants. And if I were somebody, I think I'd do that. Whether Edwards doesn't want it, I don't know. But if I were doing a food truck, I think that might be a pretty decent business. Beyond that, it gets very complicated from a sanitation point of view. Some of these are very sophisticated trucks. I tried to guess on the way here how much these trucks cost, but I'm guessing they're somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000, because you got very sophisticated equipment in there. You got to handle grease, you've got to handle clean water and wastewater and so on. So I think that's to get a number of trucks, we have to be very careful about how they do it from a sanitation point of view. The ones we have so far are not really an issue, not the kind of thing, not cooking the way a lot of these trucks are expected to cook. The other thing that comes out of the paperwork that you gave us is the idea of partnering with local businesses, local restaurants, where this might be an offshoot that makes them more mobile, so they're not just located in one single spot. They can actually it's like the Rib Fest and so on, where people come in and sell. So I think it makes some sense to, if they would do that. The only way that's going to happen is if you have what they suggested is a meeting of the local businesses and possible truck operators, and see if there's common ground, and see how they're going to handle the sanitation issues, because that does require some inspection, and we're not prepared to do that, but you can set the rules up. But so it's, I think, worth pursuing, but very limited, maybe case-by-case basis to begin with. One of the places that suggested you run a trial program, a pilot program, we might consider that if there are a couple people who are interested in trying some things out and see if we can make some things work. And See, I'd like to see synergy with the restaurants in town, one way or another. If they support it, I think it could succeed. If they're busy fighting it, the other issues may make it difficult to move ahead, so I have cautious optimism that we ought to look at it.
If you look at our mission statement, I guess, is it in the mission of the village to lease space or allow vendors to vend on village property? Is that our goal? Or is our goal to provide police, water, and basic services that a village provides for residents? Now, I see the government as a referee, okay? And you have different players in the game, and the village should also play in the game, okay? When you look at economics, that's one of the reasons why I voted against having business owners rent space in the village, because I felt it was a conflict of interest and it competed with other property owners that leased out commercial real estate space. That's why I voted against that three whatnot years ago. So where does it stop? So if we were to produce an ordinance or have some sort of a policy that allowed certain vendors to vend on village property, whether it's a food truck or anyone else, well, what about cash for gold vendors? What about everybody else that wants to sell on village property? Who makes a decision who's going to vend on our property or not? How about having restaurants sell things at movies at the park? I don't think it's a good idea for us to open Pandora's box here. I think we should leave it as it is. Again, why are we even getting mixed up in this? I think we should stay out of the economy, let business owners that have a mobile business make their own partnerships with other private property owners to put their food trucks. Then there's never going to be accusations of favorites, who got to vend on village property and who didn't. I think we should just let this one go and leave it as it is.
I'm a little confused on I wasn't referring to village property at all.
Okay, what about government property?
Yeah, I was talking about just being out there, even if they're on private property, like, you know, if depending on where it's sitting. I mean, it's going to be an advantage for certain things. The library has a festival, one of the school districts has something, whatever the case may be. That's a little different situation. I'm not talking about the village property at all. I'm talking strictly the trucks as far as coming into town for an event, like say a cruise night or something like that. They should be licensed, and we need to know, because if you're going to license any business, anybody else that owns a business in a building, they're licensed. So I think we need to have that, and it's just a matter of where they're going to be, and obviously, what they're selling, as long as it's, it meets the requirements. I mean, no alcohol or anything like that. But as far as the trucks go, no, I don't think they should be. I wouldn't want them in the park at all here, to tell you the truth. I mean, there's a whole concession area that's already done and set up for that. So
I do need to be clear.
Right of ways, I think, is one of the questions. Sorry, Brian. Didn't
No, that's okay. I do need to be clear. We actually do have a vendor that comes out to our movie nights. It supplements what we do out of the concession stand. It's a Kona Ice. It's a shaved ice.
Remember that, yes.
I do want to, and they are planning on coming back this year. We do have a partner. We really don't have a partnership per se, but we do allow for them to come in, and it's actually been a good symbiotic relationship. We don't own a ice shaving operation, and so it works out pretty well.
Well, perhaps an ordinance is in order then. I mean, if that company is coming out here and the village likes that company, who's to prevent somebody else from parking right down the street? I mean, I think that we should have some sort of ordinance for it.
I think he has a good point. Then what happens when another shaved ice company says,
Right.
well, why can't we vend there? What's our response? We have a relationship with this current vendor. Why are we playing favorites then?
I think that's why Naperville probably does the lottery system, because there's only so many spots that they want to fill, and maybe that's an idea here too, depending on how many spots you think is wise throughout the town.
My feeling is I think it's, the take I have on it is, it seems like it's going more mainstream all the time. So and what I mean by part of that is, I think a lot of people think a food truck, they're gonna get a unique dining experience. It's gonna be a local flavor or something like that. But a lot of these newer food trucks that are coming on the market is really from franchisors of national brands. So the same thing that you see, with the drive-through is now showing up on the street corner. So just be aware, be prepared for that as well, so it's not always that unique dining experience per se. I think overall kind of would support the idea. I think, as everything, the devil is always in the details. So what does that look like as far as the number, locations, restrictions? those kinds of things. And, you know, can we put it forward? I think Mr. Lamb said it. Maybe we can put it forward, you know, as a 1-year test or something, or a 6-month test, kind of gauge the feedback, see how the residents like it, what the demand is, and then how the existing restaurant operators, you know, did their concerns come true? You know, did their sales drop 10% at lunch when the trucks were parked down the street? Or did their sales actually increase because everybody comes down for that now? And it actually ends up being a benefit when we think that maybe it's gonna be a negative. So I think if we look at, you know, how neighboring communities are doing it, if we put the right, you know, things in place to kind of monitor it and maybe test it for the first year, something that I would support.
I would ask staff, how many complaints do we have for the 6 units that were mentioned in the staff report?
None. We haven't had a single complaint or worry about any of the operations. In fact, well, I take that back. We do get complaints that Flirty Cupcake runs out of cupcakes quicker than we can get down there. That's about it.
Trade secret?
I mean, and I don't think we should worry if another shaved ice comes in. We can say no. I mean, we don't have to justify it or anything else. It's just like another business. If it wants to come to town, we can say no or yes. It doesn't make us bad guys. It's just we're not allowing that particular item to come into the village. And if the village trustees will remember, we had an individual that came forth with a hot dog trailer, and he was okayed, and he never came back. I mean, once he looked into the whole procedure, he never came back I mean, we okayed it, and he never came back, never had his hot dogs out there or anything else. The only hot dog one is that Chicago dog that came here about 2 years ago, I guess, and he's behind in the little corner past Andreessen's. But I don't see much of a problem with this, and I would hate the board to get all tangled up and well, we got to do this and we got to do that. It's pretty easy, I think, to get through this. We can always have legal look into it, but
You know, I'm in agreement with you, Mayor Collins. The simple fact is, I seriously doubt there's going to be an inundation of food trucks serving the village of Plainfield. Number one is you have to have a population that is going to buy from the truck. When do we have gatherings of people? We have them at a concert night, maybe a little bit of a movie night, a fest, and Tuesday night. I mean, there are no other opportunities. I mean, you're not going to you park your food truck someplace in the area and wait for individuals to come and eat lunch. It just isn't happening. You have to have a big population like the city of Chicago. I see food trucks continually in the city of Chicago on the streets, main streets, and people go to them, patronize them. Another thing is, if you ever look at the average food truck, they always very definitely show their health license, because it's not something that it has to be regulated. And if it's not clean, it's not good, it's not going to succeed. It's that simple. And as Mayor Collins said, let's not get all jammed up in writing an ordinance that's entirely too complicated for nothing. There's not a problem, it hasn't been a problem. And the one thing I always continued to say is we have to have competition. Competition breeds a better product. If you go up Route 59 from 135th Street, just a little bit on the east side of the street, you got a Culver's, you got a White Castle, and you have a Wendy's. Boom, boom, boom. You can buy 3 different types of hamburgers there. It gives competition breeds success. Competition breeds a good product. And if you have more food trucks, like I say, we're not going to be inundated with a problem. That's how I feel. And I know you all agree. Thank you.
I guess to make this less complicated, I'm okay with moving forward, and I'm just caution though using government property to help one business out over another, and that's the government picking favorites. So as long as we're off government property, off village property, and individual business owners are brokering their own deals with individuals that have select pieces of property, location, that's fine. That's none of our business as far as I'm concerned. Let's license them properly, make sure people aren't getting sick and they're charging sales tax, and we're set if that's even within our parameters or not. But other than that, I'd hate to see the government pick favorites though and have, you know, just accusations, oh, this person knows that person, so they got that spot that the village owns and they can park their hot dog truck there. I don't want to see that. Other than that, let's let business owners make money in the village and produce some sales tax and some services for our residents. Thank you.
No matter what we do, the patch will tear us up anyway, so.
Well, and I guess that's my concern is, I obviously I understand simple is better, but I think, again, the devil is gonna be in the details, and I think you have existing restaurant operators that ultimately could be negatively impacted by this, so I think we have to keep them in mind, because they've got, you know, their businesses, you know, real estate taxes, sales tax, equipment and everything else, a large investment that they've made. So they just arbitrarily say, we don't want to get bogged down in the details and let's just move forward with this. I think sometimes you need to spend the time to get into the details to make it work for everyone.
Okay. As I'm seeing it, we'll come forward with an ordinance regarding the cupcake and the wine-infused cakes. And the other one, we will continue to monitor at the staff level, and if we find ourselves in a point where we're seeing a deleterious impact on our brick and mortar type facilities, then we can come back with that. Likewise, if we find ourselves in a position where we're getting greater and greater requests for competition on public property, we can come back with a different policy on that front too.
Direction we've given staff clear as mud, or are we okay?
No, actually, I think that we're fine. We'll just monitor the food truck issue, and I think we have good direction with regard to the cupcake kitchen stuff.
Oh.
Great, thank you.
Reminders.
June 10th will be the coffee with the mayor. June 11th is the HPC. June 15th will be our next village board meeting, and our next committee of the whole will be June 22nd.
To adjourn?
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. That motion carries.